Okay, everyone, we're going to start in a couple of minutes. So can you please grab a drink? All the fridges are open. Grab some pizza. Okay, also we have a freebies table. You can grab some freebies from the freebies table and get a seat. Okay, everyone, can you please take your seats? We're about to start in 1 minute. Sharif, is live streaming working now? Can you just check we're okay? Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Open Web Application Security Project. Thank you for taking some time of your evening to come and listen about application security. My name is Sam Stepanyan. I'm one of the chapter leaders. Chap behind the camera is Sharif Mansour and Dr. Greg Frakos. We are very friendly guys. OWASP London chapter leaders, please come and talk to us. If you're tweeting about our event, the hashtag is OWASP London, and yes, we're on Twitter, OWASP London. We are all volunteers. This is why there are 3 of us, because it's actually quite a lot of work involved in organizing these events and inviting speakers and running this community. There are 45 volunteers of OWASP worldwide, and we are a non-profit organization. In the UK, here are the chapters. Obviously, we're the biggest one in London. Good news, we had a bit of a problem with Birmingham chapter, which disappeared for a while. We went inactive, and I'm pleased to inform that it's just been restarted. So people in Birmingham, right, and people up north, you now have a local community, and the meetups will be starting very, very soon. So make sure you check the OWASP Birmingham page. There are 200 OWASP chapters worldwide, around the world. New chapters disappear all the time, but we are more or less in every single country. Here's the agenda for tonight. I hope you all had already some food and drink and had a bit of networking. Yeah, this is why we have our lovely plastic name badges provided by Microsoft, so we know who we are. So we're going to have this little welcome from myself, Greg, and Sharif. Just tell you what's happening, all the news. Then we're going to have Aunty Gilligan talking about how to become a hero from zero. And then we're going to have a break, and we're going to have Evangelos talking about smart contract security and how to hack into blockchain, very popular thing at the moment. And then we're going to have Mark giving us a bit of a hands-on lightning talk on how you can use our OWASP Zap tool using Selenium. Then we're going to have some closing remarks, and we're all going to go to the pub. This is our traditional thing, always go to the pub after the event. And the pub is called the Singer Tavern, and it's basically, well, I'll tell you where it is. You just basically leave this venue, turn right, turn left, and walk to the end of the street. You'll find it. It's a big pub in a nice building with a big round tower. You can't miss it. Right, so we do not just this regular chapter events, right? Usually we run them once every 2 months. We also run hackathons and capture the flag tournaments. We're also going to do Hacker Pub Quiz, and we're also going to be running some workshops as well, some hands-on stuff. Somehow you all managed to find us here tonight, but if you want to find out when the next event is on, the best way to do it is to either join our mailing list, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We also have a Slack channel if you're a developer using Slack. We have a YouTube channel. All our presentations are recorded, and they will be published on YouTube. Meetup, if you use Meetup app, we have OWASP London page there. And of course, we have our London page on the main owasp.org website. There's a little icon for LinkedIn. If you search for OWASP London, you will find our company page and the group as well. So all the events are published there to make sure you never miss another event. We're also live streaming this event using Facebook. So those people who couldn't make it, or we have people watching as far away as Philippines, I think. You can just tune in to facebook.com OWASP London and watch our events streamed live. Questions and answers, because there's quite a lot of us. It's going to be a bit of a problem running around with a microphone. If you take your mobile phone now and open the browser and just go to sli.do, there's a very nice app which allows you to ask questions. The event code is #OWASP, very, very easy. So if you want to ask any question from our presenter as they are speaking, please ask it now, and then we'll put it up on the big screen. Yeah, and we can do that. Okay, membership, right? So there is a paid membership of OWASP, and if you're not a member, we urge you to become a member. One of the things, you get this nice sticker. If you're a member, if you haven't got a sticker, please talk to us, chapter leaders, and we can give you a sticker. It only costs $50 a year for individual membership, and the companies can join as well. And it gives you several benefits because, well, they're on the screen here, so you can underscore your awareness, application security, increase your value, knowledge, and of course, network with like-minded peers. Very important thing money-wise, right? You'll get exclusive discounts on a lot of conferences, and they range from 10% to 100% for a lot of large international cybersecurity conferences. 44Con is coming up, by the way, and there's a discount for 44Con. We're going to be there. This $50 donation, which currently translates into about £38, is a donation to OWASP Foundation because, of course, we are a charity, and you're also donating to chapters and projects. Another cool feature, you'll get an OWASP.org email address, and the most important feature of becoming a member, you get to vote on issues that shape direction of our OWASP community. There's actually at the moment a selection for board members for next year, which I think is due to close tomorrow. So yeah, if you join today, maybe you'll get a chance to get your vote on that, and all this for only $50 a year donation. We are vendor neutral, but we are supported by vendors. You can see the logos of lots of cybersecurity companies who are our corporate members. There are a few companies who are premium members like Adobe, Fortify, Qualys, Salesforce, Signal Scientists, and Vertec. And we had a whole bunch of new corporate members joining us recently, including High Tech Bridge, HackerOne, and Facebook, which I think is very, very good. Our next event is going to be at Facebook on Thursday next week. So if you haven't got a ticket, please come and speak to me. I can sort you out with a ticket. Our local chapter is supported by all these organizations. As you can see, our last event was at Ernst & Young, EY, and obviously we're very thankful to Microsoft for providing this really cool space, which has specifically been built for meetups. So if you run a community, you can actually talk to Microsoft to run your own meetup in here as well. And obviously Microsoft Cloud Advocates and the cute raccoon, which is the new Microsoft Cloud logo, sponsoring us, and thanks very much for providing the venue, food and drink for our attendees. So big event which just finished. The reason why we haven't had any meetups for about almost 3 months is because we were all busy at this massive Application Security Europe conference, which happened in July, and that was at Queen Elizabeth II Center, just opposite, you guessed it, Westminster Abbey. So that was a fantastic conference. So it was the whole week, 3 days of training and 2 days of talks. I think about 77 speakers, lots of sponsors from all over the world. And Greg, do you want to say something about the AppSec Europe? Because I think...
Well, yeah, it was a very interesting event. It was amazing, actually, to have the opportunity to do this event and work with the guys to put things together. I think we had something like 1,000 people coming over, from all over the world. And now it's AppSec US is coming along. It's at the beginning of January. October, sorry. Yeah, California one, yes. AppSec USA in October, in case you're traveling to the US and you want to go to the event. What else do we have after that? Yeah.
Another big event is All Day Devops, which is a virtual conference. It's absolutely free. It lasts for 24 hours around the clock. It's streamed live on YouTube on 17th of October. Lots of security talks, people from OWASP. If you have access to YouTube, you can watch it. Also, what people do, they form streaming parties, right? So they just gather in a place like this, put it up on a big screen, get some pizza and beer, and they watch the presentations, also get a chance to ask live questions from the presenters. Everything's recorded, so you can check out the last year's All Day DevOps. It was a huge success. It's 96 sessions back-to-back, absolutely free, and it's absolutely fantastic. A bit of an update on the projects. We have 2 great OWASP projects which now graduated from being a lab project to a flagship project. So one of them is called OWASP Defect Dojo. It's a really nice tool to manage to the vulnerability management, and it's absolutely free, provided by OWASP, and it's open source. You can download it, you can contribute to it. It is now our flagship project, and a very nice screenshot from it. Another project that we have is called OWASP Juice Shop, which is an intentionally vulnerable e-commerce application, which is a shop when you can buy some juice, right? And it's a Node.js vulnerable application, and which teaches you how to find vulnerabilities. It also has the capture the flag mode, and there are lots of new versions. So this is the latest version, 7.4.1 is out, was out on 25th of July, and it is now our flagship project along with OWASP Zap, which is a web application vulnerability scanner tool. Back to events, there are lots of events coming up, so we can't go through all of them. I put them on the screen. So literally next year we have AppSec Israel, a big regional conference happening in Tel Aviv. There will be OWASP Portland, Morocco, Poland. There will be LA, LASCON. There will be AppSec Day in Bucharest. Boston, Indonesia, German OWASP Day we won in Norway. So if you're traveling to Germany or to Norway, make sure you get those. The January event that Greg started talking about is AppSec California 2019, which is a great conference on the beach in January. I think I will be going to that one. So I definitely like to have some beach time in January. Events coming up soon as well. We have 44Con, which is our local DEF CON conference, September 12 to 14. We will be there. And actually, we need one more volunteer because I think Greg is manning OWASP booth, and we have one more free ticket to give away, provided you can volunteer in staff OWASP booth. DevSecCon.
That's on the 13th and the 14th.
Yes,
so we want someone either both days or someone for the 14th.
Also, if you don't know, on the evening of the September the 12th is actually a free access because this is like a free network event. So if you want to come and meet some real hardcore hackers who hack all sorts of hardware and IoT devices, I think that's a good chance for you to go there. DevSecCon is another conference which will be happening in Boston, and they will be coming in London later on. So it's in Boston in September and in October as well, our partner event. And also, if you happen to be in Virginia, there's a Cyber Resilience Summer event, which is also a partner event with OWASP.
We need to mention B-Sides events, security B-Sides events like Security B-Sides Cape Town.
Cape Town. When is B-Sides Cape Town?
December.
Oh, December, right. Okay. Another update on the project, OWASP WebGoat has been our very long-running tool to teach people application security and learn about vulnerabilities. It has a new version, version 8, and they're looking for contributions because WebGoat version 6 and 7 were great. They had lots of lessons. Because the platform has changed completely in version 8, they need help basically writing new challenges or adapting old lessons to version 8. So if you're good in Java, this is purely Java tool, yeah, please help WebGoat. We're always looking for speakers. So if you would like to present your talk at future OWASP events, please submit your talk proposal to owasplondon@owasp.org and we'll consider it. We usually have talks along 3 tracks: breakers, defenders, and builders, right? So if you're a hacker and you can talk to us how you found vulnerability, broke into someone, yep, that's your chance. If you're a defender, you can tell us about some defensive technique. Yeah, we'll be glad to hear from you. And of course, you built a new tool. Yeah, please come forward and present your talk. Okay, now just a quick reminder that we have slide.do system for asking questions. You can just go to slide.do and use OWASP hashtag to ask any questions. Now it's time for speakers. The first speaker is Aunty Gilligan. So Aunty, let me plug in your laptop.
So while in setting up, I have the honor to present Aunty to you. I've known Aunty for more than 15 years, right?
2004?
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. So, yeah, I've known Aunty for many years, since the university years. What I've always remember from Aunty is that she was always smiling, she was always happy, and she had this red T-shirt that said, "I need holidays," like all year round, right? At every occasion. She grew to become a very clever security professional, because she managed, we've worked with Aunty in the past, and we've done some on-site work for various companies around the world. So yeah, it was fun. It was fun time. She's an actual redhead hacker. So please, an applause for Aunty. She's really good at what she does.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Greg. Hi, guys. Before I start, is there anybody here today named Adam? No Adams. Okay, you missed out on some treats. Anyway, right, so Greg gave me a call a couple of weeks ago to ask me did I want to come and present a talk here. And I was a little bit apprehensive because I'm moving houses and I'm moving cities. I'm trying to sell my house in Dublin. I'm trying to find a new house in Cork. I'm obviously working full time. I volunteered a few things. So I was like, I don't really know what's really involved. And he says, well, it's a 4 to 5 minute talk. And I was like, it's just, lightning talk, grand. I can fit that in, no problem. About to board my flight to come in today from Dublin, having a catch up with Greg. I was like, how are you doing with that 4 to 5 minute talk? I was like, sorry, was it 45 minute talk, not 4 to 5 minute talk? So I'll be done very quickly here. Feel free to get some drinks when I'm done. Right, so I mentioned to my boss, who kindly gave me the day off to come here, and he said, because I was like 45 minutes, what am I going to say? What can I talk about for 45 minutes? And I was like, ever since you started talking here, you chew my ear off for 8 hours a day. You can manage 45 minutes. He said that basically since I joined Logitech and started sitting beside him, he's been going gradually deaf on the right ear. So I think he means I talk a lot. I'm not sure. We'll find out. We'll fill the time anyway. Okay, so I'm Aunty. As I said, I work at Logitech. And, who am I? What do I do? Right, so this is me. Who knows what I want here? What sport is this? Is there anybody who knows what this is? Volleyball, there you go. Well done. Beach volleyball. Now, my partner had actually gone behind some sand dunes to relieve herself. That's why she's not in the photo. I play beach volleyball, and yes, I live in Ireland. It's a wet country. What am I doing? Playing beach volleyball there. Well, you can do it everywhere. The only difference between me and a beach volleyball player in the rest of Europe is that I go to tournaments with my raincoat and my tent, and that's it. This is my indoor volleyball team. A great bunch of girls. If anybody wants their numbers, just come see me after class. Yeah. These are my dogs. I love dogs. It's one of the things that divide me. I prefer them to most people. On the left, we have Lizzie. She's one of my 2 girls, and Steffi. And this is Finn. Finn was supposed to be a temporary Christmas foster. He is now a Gilligan, and he's been living in my house for the last 8 months. Okay, so this is things that I really like. I mentioned I volunteer a few places, so what else do I do? Security Besides, Greg mentioned there, Security Besides Cape Town. Has anybody, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Security Besides events. Security Besides Athens, has anybody been there? Yes, okay, so I'm one of the organizers, the main man being Greg right there. So great event. If you get an opportunity, do go. Athens is a nice place, particularly hot around the time of the year that the event is held, but it's Greece in the summer, what you gonna do? If you're not doing really well in heat, new alternative coming up, besides Dublin. I'm the main organizer of the event, and we're just setting it up right now, the inaugural conference being on or around the 23rd of March next year, pending confirmation on the venue. Watch this space if you want to hear more about Security Besides Athens or Dublin. Again, come talk to me after. Right, so, this is things that I like to do. I obviously need money to sustain myself and being able to do the things that I like. So what do I do for a living? Right now, I'm an AppSec engineer at Logitech. As I said, I've been causing deafness to my boss, but he's happy enough for me to still be there, so I'm doing something right. Before that, I was a principal security architect for Bank of Ireland. I was there for a number of years, and I was leading a really big digital transformation program. At the time it was running, it was the largest of its kind of Europe. It's still going on, so I'm not sure, was it because I did something right or I did something wrong, but the bank is still there and still working, so it's all good. Before that, I was doing some pet testing, I was doing some sysadmin, I was doing a lot of things. My background is in computer security, and it is where I met Greg when we were at the same university at the same time. And okay, why am I here? What do I have to say to you? Okay, so these look familiar, I'm sure. Nice logos, really cool names, and these used to be an attribute of malware in the past, the really cool logos, the cool names. You had, your poodle. Now, the rise of the celebrity vulnerability now. You have poodle, you have heartbleed, you have stage fright. It's all up and coming. It's been making headlines, security headlines, but headlines nonetheless. Then we had the famous WannaCry, and that made headlines everywhere. I had people, friends of mine, but they could be doing anything, not security professionals, I had a teacher friend of mine, Magda, come up to me and say, Auntie, you're not going to believe this. They sent us an email at work today at the school, and they were talking about this new thing. It's ransomware as well. WannaCry? Have you heard of it? I'm like, please, girl. And I said, I don't know. The thing is, I am known for taking really, really long naps, so her question wasn't completely unjustified. But the thing is, what WannaCry has done is it did something spectacular, and it brought information security to a wider public, and it became dinner table talk. And what does that mean? That means companies now, they really can be seen not trying to do security right or paying attention to it and putting focus on it. At the same time, you have GDPR. There we go. GDPR breaches now can have a huge financial implication for a company. So again, companies really want to do the right thing when it comes to security. They really can't afford to have a breach. So there's more and more companies now trying to get their software programs started or kind of uplift them, do the right thing now. Having effective security, though, at the same time is becoming more and more difficult because, again, you have the prevalence of BYOD. And in some companies, it's not just, I brought my laptop and I'll hook it up to the network, but I brought my smartphone and I brought my smartwatch. And the thing is, the risk is really, really high, and that in conjunction with both poor and poorly enforced policies, it can be a disaster. And this isn't speculative talk at all. I have a recent example. I'm doing a little bit of freelance work, and I was in an organization where there was a lady, and she went to her IT help desk and she said, all these things are popping out on my laptop. I don't know what's going on. So IT help desk picked it up and obviously saw there was something wrong with it. I go in, have a look. Having looked at all firewall logs and all sorts, you realize there was malware, there was command and control traffic. I was like, what did you do? And she was like, well, my kids wanted to watch Harry Potter. And the screen on my phone was very small. I don't have a laptop. So I used it to download uTorrent. Now, this lady doesn't even know how to use Word or Excel. She somehow managed to get uTorrent and get all that stuff downloaded on her laptop, but that's another story. The thing is, it wreaked havoc. It could have been prevented had there been good policies there, but she was able to hook it up to her own Wi-Fi network straight on, nothing else needed. Problem, obviously. Right, so more and more companies are trying to do the right thing, so more and more security professionals are needed. So we're in demand now, right? We're at the top there. Everybody wants us. So all high demand, great. But I live in Ireland, as I said. I keep getting messages from recruiters, and they're asking for somebody to fill a position in the UK, the Netherlands, there's been Belgium, there's been Germany, there's been France. And that was a bit tempting because I was thinking I could be playing beach volleyball in the south of France. But anyway, so yeah, obviously for them to reach out to me when I live in Ireland, they're really hard to find the security professionals that they're trying to get in touch with me. Now, why is it that it's so difficult to find a good security professional? Well, demand is high, and both you and I know money is good, right? You know, let's not kid ourselves, money is good. So why not, you know, quit doing what I'm doing, say I'm a network engineer, or I'm a system access management admin. You know, I do something that has to do with some sort of IT discipline. You know, why not jump on the security bandwagon and get some more dough? Like, nobody's gonna know, you know, nobody's gonna know. How do I get hired? Well, this is how you get hired. Management love to hear their buzzwords. So you have blue sky thinking, synergy, cybersecurity, which is just something, a term that I don't particularly like, so I put it on there. I think there's going to be a difference of opinions in this room, but there you go. Low-hanging fruit, and I'm guilty of using that myself a lot, so don't feel guilty if you use this or any of the others. And last but not least, touch base. And I know this isn't business specific, but it really annoys me, and I had to get it in there, okay? So, you know, you use this. Management, a lot of the time, depending on the organization, they interview you. They really don't know about security, but they're the hiring manager. They have to do the interviewing. They hear these lovely buzzwords like, ah, yeah, she knows what she's talking about. Let's hire her. So you're in. And yeah, that's fine. You know, fair play. You have these guys, you know, they move from another discipline to IT security. To be fair, the majority of the people who make this jump, they have a genuine interest in security. They want to do the right thing. Great, we need more people like that. A lot of them are good professionals, so they have, you know, good work ethics, they have principles, they know their strengths, they know their limitations. But then you still have this one small percentage, and they're the person who is overconfident and is arrogant and thinks they know everything. It's the person that I was when I finished university. As I said, I'm moving houses. And so I went into my shed, and there was a box that has been sitting there since about 2006. And I found a big stack of papers. It was CVs that I printed when I finished my master's degree, and I was looking for my first security job. At the very top, I said, I am proficient in all manners of IT security. Me, 23-year-old me. I knew nothing. I had no idea what I didn't know. That's what I put on my CV. No wonder it took me so long to get a job. But so, you know, this is the guy. There's people who do that. They're a problem. They can cause major problems to organizations. And for the first part of this talk, we'll discuss the pitfalls of this cybersecurity guru. And again, for the purposes of this talk, we'll call him Adam. And this is Adam. Adam doesn't know security, okay? Just remember this. Right, so Homer Simpson reading about GDPR. Okay, GDPR, big talk about this in the last while. Who here works in a company where there's been a big project about GDPR, say between the start of the year and the 25th of May? Show of hands. Let's give you some candy, because you did well to survive this. Well done. Right, was it a big panic? Was everybody in big panic, especially management? Because where I worked, it was, you have no idea what was going on in there. And, you're probably saying to me, GDPR is a good thing. Why is this a problem? And, it's not. It's not at all. It's great. It's a piece of legislation that is holding companies accountable for how they should be treating sensitive data. And that's really good. But it doesn't always work out. So I was on the Lewis, which is Irish for tram. So I was on the Lewis, and I was holding my phone. And it went off. Somebody rang me, but it was literally like a split second. But I saw it was a Dublin number. And, okay, it's a Dublin number, but I'm not going to ring it back straight away. So I Google it. And I realize it's from a customer service desk for Air, which is kind of an Irish equivalent of Virgin Media or UPC, that kind of thing. Now, I've never given them consent to contact me by phone. So only because I'm socially awkward and I don't like speaking on the phone, so I always make absolutely certain I just check the box for email. So it's like, why are these guys ringing me? I'm getting annoyed now because, you know, as a security person, I'm a bit pedantic like that. So I had nothing better to do while I was on the tram, so I decided I'll send them an email and complain about the fact that they, not only did they try to ring me when I told them they can ring me, it was just shoddy customer service, like, you know, just to keep the stats up, ringing for half a second so they can put an extra call on their list, you know? So that annoyed me, so I sent them an email. And I got a reply back. And they were saying that in order to investigate my complaint, I had to give them my full name, my home address, my account number, my date of birth, my mobile phone, and a couple more things like the, you know, my last bill, the exact amount, something like that. And underneath it, this is to ensure that we protect the confidentiality of your data. So again, pedantic security person was like, why are they asking this? I don't want to discuss my account. I don't want to do any of this. I just made a complaint. I want somebody to look at it. Why are they asking me? So I emailed it back and I said, well, this is a bit of an oxymoron. You want to protect the confidentiality of my personal data, but you're asking me to send it to you over email. You know, is there something else? Is there another set of questions I can answer? Anything? They replied back quoting the GDPR. So what happened there? Adam was called in for one of these GDPR projects, and he said, no problem, guys, I got it all under control. Adam probably set up a new GDPR policy. It made its way into the complaints department, and now I'm patiently waiting for a reply from their DPO 9 days later. What should have happened is GDPR is good. It's common sense. Protect the confidentiality of the data, but make it in a manner that makes sense. What should have happened is Adam should have looked at all of the company's relevant policies and procedures and incorporate protection controls and security measures in those rather than just create a separate document just to cover his own ass. And this is what happened. So, you know, Adam didn't do well there, and I'm just waiting to hear back and see what their DPO has to say. It should be interesting. Okay. You probably can guess where this one is going, maybe not. It's the overconfident professional who is lacking the holistic security understanding. And unfortunately, it's not too uncommon a sight. I was actually recently talking to somebody very close to me, and that person works at an Irish consultancy company. And they were telling me about their colleague who was bragging about having made a really big sale. They sold a full-blown PCI DSS package to this company. You know, auditing, consultancy, the pen testing for it, the works. This company doesn't handle credit card data. Like zero contacts. So, okay, you're probably thinking, well, it's their own fault, they signed up to this, but you know what? That person was put, they were put in a position of authority because they have certain skills and certain expertise, and they didn't do the right thing, and that's bad. Now, you know, it is a problem, and it's not all bad because really to comply with the PCI DSS standard, you know, it still gives a certain level of security and a certain level of protection, and that's fine. But just proposing the same solution to every organization and for every problem isn't doing the right thing. It could be anything. It could be like a set of standards. So you're selling, any company you go to as a consultant, you're selling them CSE 20. You have to do CSE 20. It might not be the right thing for them. Or it could be a tool. Oh yeah, you gotta use Splunk, and you know, we'll just show it in there, log everything, and then nobody has any chance of ever monitoring what's coming out of it. So that's basically rendering it useless and pointless. Or the guy who sells the PCI DSS package to a company that doesn't handle card data. But anyway, solutions need to be appropriate, and otherwise the tools can be left misconfigured, and anyway, it can leave the company in a really poor state. So again, that's something Adam does wrong, and keep an eye out for it. The one-trick pony. Okay, pitfall number 3. There's nothing on the screen, because that's the next slide. Okay, is there anybody here who is doing either security design, architecture, or is maybe on the other side of the fence? And they're doing assessment. Buddy, you're too far at the back. You can come get it after. Right. So I hope you're not Adam, because you know, there's some things that are really scary, and you know, we're not perfect. We're humans, and we'll make mistakes, and you know, we'll have an off day, or we're gonna have a brain fart, or something will happen. But there's a person who does things the wrong way continuously and consciously, and that is the worst kind and the most dangerous kind of security professional. Now, say Adam is at a security design meeting, or a solution assessment meeting, something like that, for solution X. Now, he hasn't been given any documentation. He's basically going in blind, but his boss says, come on, we can't be seen as the blocker. Please, just, you know, please go in there and sort it out in the meeting. So Adam goes, and the technical team are talking about their design, and it's a design that uses message queues. And they're looking at the particular connection, and Adam says, well, just looking at this, it doesn't quite fit with our security architecture. Why is it that node A initiates the transfer doing a push and not node B doing a pull, and that's gonna, you know, meet our principles? And the answer is, well, you know, that's not how NQ works. And Adam says, okay, and moves on to the next component, and you basically now have a design that breaches his company's security architecture and principle, and that's a problem. Or you could have a meeting with the administrators who say, well, I need direct SSH connection to server A. And Adam says, okay, but you know, we have a jump box just there, and it's there for this particular purpose. Can you not use that? And the sysadmin says, no, because I won't be able to do the stuff that I want to do. Now, if you hear that and you don't ask any more questions, you just say, okay, agree with it and move on, you're the problem. And, you know, unfortunately it happens way too often. Like, people don't have the confidence in saying, well, you know what, I don't understand how this works. The thing is, you know, we're not DBAs, we're not developers, we're not supposed to know how each and every technology works day to day. They're specialists and they're supposed to know. But the thing is, as a security professionals, you really need to be technical enough to understand. You ask the question, you sit down, and they talk to you. You need to be able to understand. And then you need to be able to understand the impact this particular solution and how it works has on security. By the way, does anybody recognize the movie the second photo is from? My man, well done. Right, good job. I'm just looking around to see, can I lip read anybody say, what's wrong with encryption? Why is this up there? Well, there's nothing wrong with encryption. We love encryption, but sometimes it's just not appropriate, or it's not the right type of appropriate. So say you're the business owner of an application that uses a server to store healthcare data. Really, really, really sensitive information, okay? And obviously you want that data protected. So you ring Adam, your friendly neighborhood cybersecurity guru, and you say, Adam, here's that server. really important stuff in there. What do? Adam says, I got it. Don't you worry. We'll encrypt it. I'll put full disk encryption on it. Now, that sounds great to the business owner. I see some head shaking. Yes, what is the problem with Adam's solution? Obviously, putting FD on the server really protects from one or two scenarios. Either the hard drive is damaged accidentally or otherwise, or somebody has managed to bypass all the physical controls of the data center or gained access to your rack, took out the hard drive, put it under their arm, and made a break for it with it. It doesn't really stop the DBA from having access to the files in there. It doesn't stop the sysadmin who has access to the server for admin reasons. It doesn't stop any of that unless other controls are put in place. So yeah, when you talk about encryption, there's a few other things that you need to keep in mind. Obviously, the sensitivity of the data, but also its lifetime, because what is the point of implementing 2048-bit encryption for something that has a lifetime of 10 minutes? Like, you have to think about the length a successful brute force attempt is going to take and the lifetime of your data, and make an appropriate decision there. Now, encryption is expensive. Probably the executives here know that better than anybody else, the ones with the budget. Sometimes it is also slow, and just sometimes it's just not necessary. Like GDPR, again, a knee-jerk reaction was encrypt everything and we'll comply, because that's what matters. But there's always alternatives. So when you're thinking about protecting confidentiality of your data, you kind of have to think the different use cases, what it is you're exactly trying to achieve, and think about alternatives like anonymization or your tokenization, pseudonymization. And yeah, basically, when you're dealing with confidentiality of data, you kind of have to get out of the encryption box, keep an open mind, and don't do what Adam does. Adam doesn't know security. Okay. Right. So next, we looked at the pitfalls of the security professional. And now it's time we kind of look at some of the good building blocks. Now, GRC is seen as the dull cousin of security. It's not sexy. Nobody really wants to say they're doing it, but they kind of have to. The truth is, it's really important, and there is a skill in doing it right, because it's right in documentation. Not everybody's good at it. So your documentation can be your policy. So you put in a position in your organization where you either have to build up your policies from scratch, or they're really, really bad, and you kind of have to do something about it. So, okay, policies. It sounds really, really ominous a task, but really, there's templates out there. I now work in Cork. I think it's the same version. It's different versions of the same document going around Cork in the different companies. Somebody started using one template, and then they moved from organization to organization. You have the same document everywhere, just looking slightly different. But templates are good. Like, somebody else has done all the dirty work, and they're not all bad, but have a look at them. Don't just copy paste. You know your organization better than anybody else. You know what's important. Modify what's there. Don't start from scratch. There is absolutely no need for it. Also, policies. They should be the law. I've been to a lot of companies where I came across an ETP, or exception to policy. And that is a bugbear of mine, because there really should be no such thing. It's like saying murder is outlawed, but we'll allow Greg to do it for the next 6 months, and that's okay. Now, Greg can be a bit dodgy, so it's not a good thing. And if it's not good for murder, it's not good for a policy. So policy is law. Please remember this. There is no such thing as exception to policy. Now, standards is a different thing. They're more technically prescriptive, and you can get an exception to them, the beautiful ETS, exception to standard. So standards, they're technical, and you have to develop them, but you really need to understand the vulnerability point. So say you're trying to put together a standard for service accounts in your organization. You kind of have to understand what is it that makes service accounts a target. And a service account is, it's privileged. It's a powerful account, so this is why people try to get to them. So what can you do? You want to write a standard. Where do you start? Okay, you understand they're a target for this particular reason. Now, what can I do? There's a few things you can start off with. You can limit a service account to just the one server. Don't use the same one for like 10 or 20 servers. Compromising one, compromise the other. Free game for the attacker. You can, depending again on your policies, but maybe you can have a preference for the local service account unless the service account has to have access to other servers. So obviously you need that to be a domain account. Strong password complexity, really basic stuff, but don't get caught up in things that are common. You might be thinking, but there's this project they're doing now. It's going to bring this new tool. It's going to be generating the passwords automatically. That project might never materialize. Write the basics down in your standard, pick your password complexity, and just get on with it. I like that. Have them ring you again. Now, service accounts, they could be anything. So maybe you have a SQL or an Oracle service account. And what's different there is that maybe the password for that has to be hard-coded into an application or into a server. But you can't have it sitting there. Have your standard say that password can stay where it is. It's encrypted, and the key encryption key has to be somewhere else. Sorted. Basically, loads of types of accounts, and if any of you are in banking, the good old mainframe, there's no getting away from it. So basically, have a think about what it is you're trying to protect and find the different attack vectors. Just write something down, and that's it. Same for the tech spec documents. Again, plenty of templates, STIG, very popular. Like, if it's good enough for the United States Department of Defense, it's probably good enough for other organizations. But again, review it, validate, modify. You might have to go through every single line of registry key after registry key. Google is your friend. All the information is out there. It just takes time. Right, so policies and standards. Where can we go next? Security architecture, as being done in companies right now. Traditionally, this is traditional security architecture, to the pain of security and technical teams. Security usually gets bolted on, added on to a design, because the change is like urgent. We have to do this right now, and we need the security controls to be in there, but they have to be ad hoc in order to meet the requirements of this particular change. There's budget constraints, there's short timelines. It's what you usually quoted as the reason for something being urgent. And you basically don't get an opportunity for a more holistic approach. It would suit the needs of the organization long term, but no time for that. So what happens is you end up with this, which is a mismatch of processes, tools, and they're really, really difficult to monitor. I'm sure a lot of you are in environments just like that, and I really feel for you. We're pretty much all on the same boat, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Now, security architecture will be the cornerstone of any subsequent projects that go ahead in your organization. Whether that's cloud or on-prem, obviously a few differences here and there, but basically the principles are the same. And you get this right first time, or as close to right as possible, and it's going to make your life easy, and it's going to allow for a more stable and more secure state, and changes can happen quickly, and they don't necessarily have a huge adverse effect or either performance or functionality. But where do you begin? You have to define your scope. And this is my idea of collaboration, and also I like South Park, so, you know, 2 birds in 1 stone. So you need to define the scope of your security architecture. It's everything. It's everything. It is your infrastructure, all phases of it, all phases of design, all phases of implementation, all phases of operation. And bear in mind, where you have CI/CD, you have to pay particular attention, because there you have code as infrastructure, and you know that can be very dangerous in itself. The security architecture will apply to the applications and the solution, and again, it's going to be all phases of the design and implementation and operation. It's going to apply to your business controls and operational procedures. Say you have a business unit. It's my job to do something with, say, you know, card data. I have to send it to my teammate. I have to email, you know, the long code of a card. You know, it's an operational process, but it's no less significant. We still have to put a control in there to protect the card data. Environments. Your security architecture should apply to all environments. Doesn't matter what you call it in your organization. Dev tests, you can have your immediate framework, migration, integration, whatever you call it. It's in scope. It's always in scope. Dev environment is very important because it's where changes to the network and the infrastructure take place, and there's a lot of innovation going on in there, but it's also where a lot of the security vulnerabilities get exposed. Intentionally or unintentionally, you know, it's prime ground for something like this. But the thing is, there is always a way to secure your dev or any other environment. You can keep innovation going, you can keep the schedules, you keep the developers happy, and you know, just work with them. Work with the teams. You have to understand how they work, how the processes work, and then trying to embed your controls in there in as seamless as possible a way. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of resistance, and I'm sure a lot of you have already been through that. Okay, so you have a scope. Now what? You have your business requirements and your enterprise architecture. Now, business requirements is probably something that a lot of people forget about, but we have to remember security is there to enable the business. Like, there is no point me having the, you know, implementing great security controls, and, you know, the environment is so slow, it's so difficult, everything takes a long time, the business fails. You know, it's not going to work. You have to remember about the business. You're there to enable the business. You're not there to do security for the sake of security. Your enterprise architecture is another contributing factor, and your security architecture really should be aligning to the enterprise architecture. Now, it may be difficult for you to get any documentation, especially if your company isn't known for doing good documentation, but you know, ask for it. You might get something. I use chocolate and peanut butter cookies as a bribe. It works. You know, try something. Okay, so you know, you have the business side of things. You got all you can out of them, and now you get to what is it you have to consider. What are the factors you have to weigh in that are going to define your security architecture, which is where you have, you know, it's under your control. You're defining it, you're designing it, it's your baby. So you have your laws and regulations. So you have things like, again, GDPR, you have HIPAA, you have PCI DSS, you have SOX. There's a lot of things that you need to consider, and they depend on the nature of your business, but also where your company operates. Then you have your standards and maybe certifications. you have your ISOs, you have your SOC 2, you have NIST, your company might have an affiliation with a program and they have to be certified for that. You have to take that into consideration, as well as your information security management system, your ISMS. Now, ideally, your ISMS is already aligning to your certifications and your standards and all that, because it is the full set of your policies, standards, and your physical and logical controls. But if it's not, maybe it's time you have a look at your ISMS and modify it to align with your standards. Now, a lot of these are going to dictate your security architecture framework. The loads out there, you could probably go to a 3-day conference and still there is going to be no consensus of what is the best. But loads to choose from. There's SABSA, there's TOGAF, there's DODAF, there's ZACMAN, there's loads out there. Now, they're great open security architecture frameworks, but really, despite them being kind of tried and tested, and they're there for a reason, people use them for a reason, but what are they doing really? They're just giving you a vision and they're a guideline on how you're going to plan and design your security architecture. You don't really need one of those frameworks. A bit of exposure in different security principles and positions, a good head on your shoulders, keeping security in mind, just having a little bit of common sense and spending loads and loads of hours online and doing research, probably going to give you the same result. They're there for a reason, but they're not a must-have. Not using an open security architecture framework does not mean that your security architecture isn't going to be successful. Now, principles of the security architecture. This isn't the law, okay? This is just my opinions. It's a few things that I've used over the years. I think they're just sound building blocks. And they can really give you a place to start from if you're doing security architecture in your organization instead of starting from scratch, because you'd be surprised if you're not using a security architecture framework. There's very little information out there on where to start. So, security and privacy, don't forget GDPR, security and privacy by design. So, like all of them, I think they're all pretty self-explanatory, but security and privacy, they really shouldn't be an afterthought. They, this should be your overarching principle. Without this, you're going to get nowhere. Trying to design your controls after you've assessed the solution, you're trying to assess the impact that it has on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your data. And you then have to try and design the controls as close to the source as possible and also where they can be monitored. And now, why is this important? Knowing where the evidence of the control is and knowing how to get to it is going to make your life so much easier when an auditor comes along. Trust me. If you're doing security architecture, take the extra time and write down where you're evidencing every single one of your security controls. It's going to make your life a hell of a lot easier. Security controls appropriate to the risk. As I said, we're not here to do security for the sake of security. So security controls should be appropriate to the risk that they're trying to either mitigate or reduce. Risk reduction, again, should also be balanced against the total cost of the control, but also for any reduced operational effectiveness and flexibility. Secure SDLC. We had a chat here before we started. Who here uses code analysis tools where they work? Static, dynamic, anything else? You guys are getting all the candy. I'll get you after. Right, I don't know, is it working well where you are? Are the developers, trying to get away from doing it? Is it working well where you are? All good? You? All good, good stuff. We're just starting that where I'm working, so I'm really curious to see how it all pans out. I might have a chat with you after. Okay, so SDLC, your security development lifecycle. Best practice in the development of systems is vital to the integrity of a solution. Like, you have data being processed, and if an application is in an unmanaged environment, in an environment that isn't secure, then you really can't guarantee the reliability of the original data, but also of the process data, the results you get out of the application. So very important, ensure the development environment is maintained, and is maintained not only from a change perspective, but also from attacks from malicious software. Now, I was tempted to put in a really big picture of Anne Robinson up here for this one, but I thought it was going to ruin the aesthetics of the rest of the group, so I left it as is. Right, the easiest way into a system, a lot of you know, is the least protected part, which is the weakest link. That is what makes other parallel controls pointless. So when you have defense in depth, you have multiple independent controls, and they're complementary, and you have redundant layers, and it's all good. But when you have the weakest link, like here, then there can be multiple ingress points, and not every one of those points is going to have the same level of controls. That makes it the weakest link. Keep an eye out for it. It's your weak point. If somebody tries to get in, this is where they go. So try to identify it and put some indicator controls on the side if you can. Now this, ensuring accountability. I like this one. Human nature is great. So ensuring accountability is making sure you can prove the identity of an actor who has undertaken a particular action. Now, knowing that this is possible in an environment, it has an effect on its own. Most people, when they know they're being observed, they behave better. So having something like this in your environment and users knowing about it, it makes them less likely to misbehave. But also, if you don't have this control in place, what happens is a user can always just deny the action, and there's no way for you to prove it. Okay. Security standards, we spoke about them. Designing with standards, use your existing standards from your organization. As I mentioned earlier, same with policies and other documents like that, you're avoiding reinventing the wheel. But the plus on this one is twofold. Security standards in an organization are usually signed off, endorsed, accepted by senior management. If you're designing your security architecture and using security standards as part of that, there really is less likely pushback from your technical teams, just because you have the senior management buy-in for that. Your least privilege, again, one of the basics. Processes, users, programs, they really should only be given access to the resources that they need as a minimum in order to perform a function. No more, and why are we doing this? It reduces the likelihood of intentional or unintentional compromise or corruption of the data, and also it gives you some limitation if there is a breach. Defense in depth? No, audits. All right, audit, sorry guys, I'm a slide behind here. Audit significant activities. We just spoke about that. There we go. Sorry about that. Defense in depth. Right, we spoke about this earlier. Providing multiple security features, operating at different levels, using different processes, and also using different technologies. If any of you are working for any of the CMA 9, this won't be news to you, using different technologies. But any security control basically can fail. It can be malicious activity. It can be unexpected circumstances, But anyway, other independent complementary controls can be in place and reduce the damage and can reduce the compromise. And multiple defense mechanisms will reduce the likelihood of an immediate loss or corruption of the data. So good practice, again, put it in there. Like invitation only. My previous boss would say, don't call us, we'll call you. So you have non-interactive connections in your environment pretty much everywhere. And with this principle, what you're doing is you have a level of assurance that I know I'm the high trust zone and I'm initiating the connections. I always know who's coming in. I'm the boss. Now, a few more of these. I'm nearly done. I'm probably going to rush through these because I don't think I'm running out of time. Right, OK. Simplify and standardize. Right, I'll be quick. A simple environment is easier to manage. Less complexity means an environment that is easier to maintain. It's easier to do upgrades. It's easier to do patches. If there is a compromise, it's, again, easier to find the culprit and mitigate. Mutual authentication, basic concept. You have a connection to a node. You basically have to make sure both sides are who they say they are. Secure recovery. Quite a simple concept, but not followed very often. You have a compromised host. It's taken offline, and then you do a little bit of investigating, and then you put it back online. You know, you're just going to introduce the same vulnerability right back into the environment. Just make sure before you put something back online, its security is sound, and it's a good state. End-to-end technology lifecycle? No, there's something wrong with my slides. Inbound interactive connections. Right. Secure inbound interactive connections. You have no direct connectivity for inbound interactive users. In one of my previous slides, we're talking about the admin who wants to SSH directly into a server. Avoid that if you can. Use a virtual desktop. Use VPN. Use a jump box. Use something. There really should not be direct administrative access into a server. End-to-end technology lifecycle, again, basic. Some companies have rules like using technology when it's at -1 or in -2. You know, whatever works for you, but basically try to avoid something that has a published end-of-life date. If you're designing for a project that uses existing components, one of the existing components is already out of support, make sure that it's part of the responsibilities of that project to uplift and upgrade that component before the whole project goes live. They'll have to bear the cost, but it works for you, so go for it. Inbound interactive high-risk users. This is basically about strong authentication. And again, GDPR, a lot of it is already there, but you have your high-risk business user payments or something like that. So an administrator, make sure you have more than one factor. Strong authentication can be, it can be defined as many different things depending on who you're talking about. So, pick something that works for you. Protect the data. That speaks for itself. This is basically what security is at the end of the day. It is all about the protection of its confidentiality, its integrity, its availability. So, it's a good principle to have. And remote log collection. Again, a lot of companies do that. It's not news to anybody, but make sure the log files are away from the system for which they're recording the activity. That makes you make sure you always have available a forensically sound copy of the log files. You could have a forensic investigation going on or a legal investigation going on. That will make sure that it's there and it can be used. Fidelity of environments. In short, make sure the security controls you have in place, they're the same across all environments. This is twofold. It avoids something going into production. with lower levels of security, and also it's actually good for application developers as well. An application is configured the same way in all environments. The data always have the same journey through the application. It's a little bit of a pain to set it up, and there is always a bit of resistance, but in the end, it does work out. And don't trust, prove. You know, you're designing a system, and we say, okay, this is the design, we're going to go into production with it. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do it the way we agreed. So there should be another layer of defense. You know, you're doing the design, there should be somebody else there who is assessing what was actually implemented matches the agreed design. Okay, so basically, last one, very important, not usually talked about. People will do a lot for you if you're nice to them. You know, you work in a coffee shop and you have 2 cupcakes left, and one is stale, it's a day old, it's manging looking, and you have a fresh one. Greg and I walk in, we both want a cupcake. Now, Greg is eccentric. He can be fussy because his cup and saucer aren't from the same set, or his fork has 3 prongs and not 4. You know, he's a pain. I walk in with him, I'm a ray of sunshine, I tip well. You know, who's gonna get the good cupcake? I'm gonna get the good cupcake. You know, people respond to somebody who's nice to them. You know, have you not worked at the help desk and you had 2 tickets and one was gonna take a long time, but it was from somebody who was nice to you, and the other one was a quick fix, but that person was cranky AF. You know, who are you gonna go to first? Like, attitude is really important. It gets you a lot of buy-in, and people will hear you out if you're nice to them. So that is it. Apparently, there's no time for questions, but you can catch me at the bar later on if you want. Okay? Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It wasn't a cupcake, it was an apple, just to make sure.
Okay, well, I'm going to break. Actually, please carry on asking your questions, because actually Aunty did get 2 questions on slide.do, so Aunty, probably you can answer those questions when you are having your drink. So one question for Aunty I got was, how do you get security architecture right in agile development environment? And there was another one about GDPR.
Is this on? Yeah. Sorry, I'll move. Okay, how do you get security architecture right in an agile development environment? Security, who asked that question? It's somebody who's not here, is it? Is it?
Could be anyone, yeah.
Right, I don't know who
Could
I'm
be from the
responding
audience.
to.
Exactly.
And also half the people are gone. Right, okay. Agile environment, you know, security principles, they're really no different from one environment to the other. It's processes you have to keep an eye out for. I was talking earlier about you have to understand the process. No matter what it is, it could be development, as in this question. Agile doesn't mean the same to my organization and your organization. We could be doing agile in a completely different manner, but the security principles are still applying to the process. You just have to understand the process, sit down, pay attention. Again, CI/CD is so important. Automation is so important. You just have to look at your processes and add the security controls into that particular process and how you're doing agile.
Yeah, and I think probably the GDPR question is very generic, is in our industry perspective, right? It's a bit of a nightmare to comply, right? So
it's not really, though. That's the thing. You know, GDPR was late coming. I wish it was here ages ago. It's common sense. It's just, you know, now it has become law, and it really isn't a nightmare. Like, you have to minimize your data. It's a lot of work. Like, yeah, it is probably a nightmare. Yeah. You have to go through all your applications. What data are we collecting? Where is it stored? How long are we keeping it for? You have to go through all your, you know, operational procedures. You have to go through all your policies and see where the data, PII data, or, you know, healthcare data is in scope for a particular policy or procedure. You have to amend those. Just don't create one document to say we'll just comply with GDPR, we'll keep your data safe. It just doesn't work like that. It's a long-term project. It's something that companies should have been doing all along, but it is what it is.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Aunty. And I think if there are more questions, I'm pretty sure the audience would like to
Thank
ask
you.
while you're in the break. Thank you. Okay, everyone, can you please start taking your seats because we are almost ready for our second talk about smart contracts, about blockchain. Yeah, very, very hot topic today, how everything's going to be on blockchain, right? So, yeah, how do we hack it? Apparently it's very easy, so take your seats to find out. Yeah, I think we're ready to start. Can you please take your seats for the second talk tonight from Evangelos. So as mentioned before, blockchain security and smart contracts are everywhere. And there aren't many talks about hacking the blockchain. There was one fascinating talk at the Application Security Europe conference earlier this year, which we hosted in July. Unfortunately, the videos are not available yet, but slides are. So I urge you to go to appsec.eu and find a presentation on blockchain hacking. If you're interested in this topic, you'll find a lot of interesting surprises in there. I think now we're ready to go for the Evangelos' presentation. There you go. It's all yours now, Evangelos.
Can you hear me? Does this work? It's on.
Yeah, it's on.
All right, perfect. Can you hear me correctly? Perfect. My name is Evangelos Vermenzoglu, and today I'm going to talk about smart contract security. Yeah. Like that? Yeah, that's better. Perfect. Okay. I'm working for Positive, and I'm a security researcher, engineer, consultant. And for the past year, we've been researching and conducting smart contract assessments. I'm going to start off with some blockchain basics, and then I'm going to dive off to a few vulnerabilities of smart contracts, which are kind of different from the traditional pen testing. Starting off, I'm going to go with the gas concept. In the Ethereum blockchain, they introduced the gas concept, which is the extra cost that you pay when you make a transaction. If anyone ever performed a transaction in the blockchain, sending Ethereum to another person, you would have paid an extra cost. Now, this cost consists of two different things. The first one is the gas limit and the gas cost. The transaction cost, which is the execution plus the transaction cost. When you send a transaction into the blockchain, you're executing code. So even if it triggers some kind of functionality in another contract or a wallet, it's going to execute some operation codes, some opcodes. Now, in the blockchain, in Ethereum, every opcode consumes some amount of gas. And this is what the gas limit actually is. When we send a transaction, we set the amount of operations that we're going to perform or that we assume we're going to perform. Every contract is different, so the amount of code that's going to execute on the back, may vary. Now, the gas price is the amount of price we set to each unit of gas. If you multiply that It is the kind of reward that the miner gets when they actually compute your transaction. When the miner consumes and operates, checks your transaction, they will start deducting from the gas limit you set the amount of gas that they actually took to perform this operation. The surplus that remains will be sent back to you in another later point in time. If the gas is not enough, the transaction will get reverted, meaning that you didn't give enough transaction fees for the operation to be processed. This is just for the concept of gas. We're going to need it later to understand the vulnerabilities. A few things about transactions. When we send a transaction to another party, it is not written to the blockchain instantly. First, the transaction is added into a transaction pool. In this transaction pool, every unverified transaction is there. Now, the miners will go into that pool and will start picking the transactions that they want to add into their own block and publish it later into the blockchain. Now, miners are a bit selfish, and they want to choose the transactions that are more profitable for them. Also, the blocks that miners produce have a certain limit. They cannot add an infinite number of transactions. The average number of transactions within a block are around 100. So the miner will have to pick which transactions are more appropriate for that block at that time. This is why miners choose the more expensive transactions. This is why the gas price, we talked before, is important. The higher the gas price, the more probably you are to be selected, your transaction, to be selected by the miner. Now, let's move on to the first type of attacks. This is, the attack is called front running, and it is very simple. It is, I'm going back to the previous slide. When an unverified transaction lies into the transaction pool, it is possible for other users of the blockchain to monitor that pool and try to find what other transactions lie in there. So, this is very common in decentralized exchanges. So the example I'm going to use is with traders. Let's say you're a successful trader, and you know what you do. And you make a call, you're trying to trade buy a certain coin at a certain price, and you make the transaction. If someone knows your address and knows what you're actually going to do, they can monitor you. And where your transaction is a transaction pool, they can actually see what you're trying to do and send the exact same transaction, but with higher gas price. Now, because miners are selfish, they're going to choose their transaction instead of yours. Or they could choose yours as well. But since it is more expensive, they're going to prioritize it with a higher priority in their block. So you can actually lose the position you have in the platform by someone who actually spends more money in a transaction. It is very easy to monitor a transaction pool. It's more like a script monitoring for a certain address to trigger a transaction. So it mostly affects smart contracts, which is a first in, first out type. The first who gets there gets the result, the reward. The second might not get the reward, or they might get the reward maybe deducted, or at a more expensive price. There are two different types of front running. It's the user front running, which is what we actually explained right now, and it is the miner front running. The miner, this is less probable to happen because miners are, they can do this, but it's less probable to happen. It's when the miner actually crafts a block, and because they craft a block and they're in position of power, they can actually see what you're going to send, and they're going to place their own transaction on top of yours. So it's kind of the same thing, but the impact is much less because the miners are much less than the users of the blockchain. For examples, I have decentralized exchanges, that's the DEX. Bancor is one decentralized exchange which actually was vulnerable to one user front mining. It is fixed. The reference for that issue is on the bottom. And this is a small piece of code. It's a very naive example of how front running could be triggered. Let's say that's a smart contract that gives away free Ethereum. That's 1,000 free Ethereum to the first person who actually calls that function. If I know that someone is going to trigger this function, or if I know that a certain contract is going to go live at some point, I can time that very quickly and send the transaction, get the Ethereum, and lock the other person out. Apart from decentralized exchanges and those kind of applications, front running can also happen in ICOs. Just as a small story, me and a friend of mine, at some point, were trying to invest into an ICO. It was just £200, but that's something. And we did all the signing up. We got the whitelisting. We were ready to send our Ethereum to their contract. The token sale started at 7 a.m. At 7 a.m., we had sent the transaction, but it failed. Now, this is very weird. It's very weird and not weird at the same time, because in ICOs, funds go away very, very quickly. And I started digging up with Etherscan to see the transactions that actually went through, what happened there. Most of the transactions were invalid, and apart from the first few transactions. So one of those transactions had an extremely high gas price. So that party actually bought the majority of the tokens of that token sale, but they had to pay the equivalent of 3,000 USD in transaction fees. So that was a very expensive transaction. The average transaction fee is 30 cents, something like that. But again, that was a way to outline everyone, put them on the back, and then getting all the tokens out of that token sale. This is a screenshot from, it was a Twitter post, and the reference is on the bottom. This depicts what is the reordering, the pricing in an average block in the blockchain. This is the price of each transaction that they actually use, and on the 50th percentile, it's the lowest prices. The recommended price for a transaction in the blockchain is 60 Gwei, which should be around here, right? On the 99th percentile, on the slot 0, which is the first transaction in the block, we see that the price exceeds the 500. That's 10 times the average price that someone pays for a transaction. So for every block, this is not very weird. This is very common. Important transactions have a lot of transaction fees because they need to get processed very fast. But sometimes they get to extreme lengths. So what can we do to mitigate front running? There are multiple ways to do that. Each case may vary, but a very quick and easy way is to control it from within the smart contract. We can set an upper gas limit, and we can set a fixed limit. Setting an upper gas limit is very common. A fixed one is very rare. I think I've only seen that once. You can do this with this variable and this function. The gas price actually reports to the contract what is the gas price that was used when conducting this transaction. And the gas left returns the amount of gas that is remaining for this operation. Now, since we said on the first slide that each operation, each opcode, when executing, they consume gas, the gas left will always return a different amount, a smaller amount. So it's very difficult to control that. But we can definitely set the gas price. This is a snippet of code which it can be used like that. And this is another approach. This is the commit reveal approach. Again, this mitigates front running. It is split in two different phases, the commit phase and the reveal phase. In the commit phase, we send our intention as a hash. We have our input, we perform a hashing function, and we provide the service with the output. So they know we have a time slot where we actually make an intention to do something. And at a later point, at the reveal phase, we send the input. So in that point, there is no way for someone monitoring the transaction pool or the network to identify that from the hash, what is our intention. Unless, of course, they break the hashing algorithm, which is a completely different problem. Now we're going to payable functions. Again, we're going with some basics of the blockchain of smart contracts. In payable functions, it is the verb that actually makes a smart contract able to receive funds. We can add the verb in both functions, and each smart contract can have one fallback payable function, which is the second one on line 5. Now, on line 5, we can send funds and trigger this function if we just use the address of the smart contract and send the funds, which is exactly the same thing that we would do if we were to send funds to an address. If we want to call the function, we need to use the address, the name of the function, and use the funds as well. We're going to need that in the next issue, which is reentrancy. Reentrancy is a very interesting issue. It is, I don't know if it's safe to say that it's what made security in smart contracts possible, but it happened with DAO. DAO is the decentralized autonomous organization of Ethereum. It was a project made to fund some different crypto projects. This smart contract had around 150 million in funds, and it had one vulnerability. This vulnerability caused them to lose all of their funds. And as a result, this caused the mayhem in the Ethereum community. Ethereum had to make a hard fork in their own blockchain, meaning they had to go back in the blocks, which is a very big violation for the blockchain, and they had to switch and had to use a different history. Now, even this happened, and since they actually changed the actual blockchain, we can't really say that those 150 million were actually stolen, because in that different history, they don't exist. But that's another story. As a fun fact, this fork actually caused Ethereum Classic to be born, and it is a community that actually continued that fork of the blockchain. Now, reentrancy. What is this? It is a kind of vulnerability that actually exploits the lack of prioritization and excessive usage of gas. This is a very naive smart contract. This is vulnerable to reentrancy, and it has two different functions. The first one is deposit. So we deposit funds, and we withdraw funds. If we go through the withdraw function, the first statement requires that the user has funds, so they can withdraw those funds. The second function, the second line of code, line 7, goes and sends funds to that user, to the sender, and the last one actually deducts from that user what they actually took out. The issue here is that we make the deduction in the balances of the user after we make the send operation. And the first one is that we use a function which delegates too much gas to the next in the line. How can we attack this? It is very simple with this attack contract. So on below we have the attack contract, up top we have the vulnerable contract. The attack contract consists of two different functions, the attack and a fallback payable function. On the first function, the attack, what we do is we instantiate the victim contract. This is very easy to do if you have the source code of the victim and their address. So you make an instance of the contract, you deposit some funds, so you can bypass line 6 of withdraw function, and then you withdraw the funds. So what will actually happen in the code is that when we trigger the withdrawal, we'll go to the withdrawal, pass line 6, because we do have funds, and this is a valid statement. We'll go to line 7, where we actually trigger sending the function that sends the funds to the sender. Now, the sender is a contract. And as a contract, because we actually use the address and some funds, they will go directly to the payable function, which in turn will trigger the withdrawal function again. So now we have some kind of recursiveness. And this will go on and on and on till we set a limit in our function. This is a very naive attack example. In reality, they would actually limit the amount of times they can go in this function. So let's say that they go 2 or 3 different times. It is possible to perform this one because on how the stack works, this line of code will never trigger, or it will trigger in a very later point in time. It will be too late. So calling withdrawal, passing the first statement because we have funds, calling send funds, going back here. This does not trigger yet. This will trigger if this function allows that. I don't know if that's very clear. All right. Yes?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Ethereum, but in Bitcoin there is no loops, and this is a variation of Bitcoin. Sorry. So as I understand it, the Bitcoin code, and that's the reference client for Ethereum, has no loops in the
Yeah.
code. There's no possible to do a DDoS by like looping. So
Yeah.
so like Ethereum is a variation on it's nested inside the same blockchain, isn't it?
It's
within
a
the
different
Bitcoin.
completely blockchain.
A different blockchain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bitcoin is not Turing complete. Ethereum is Turing complete, and it allows for the code to do loops and more
Okay.
advanced stuff.
So as soon as they introduce the possibility of a loop, then there's bound
Yeah.
to be problems. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Okay.
So this is the reentrancy. Perfect. Mitigations for this issue. Instead of using the transfer function that we're using right here, call value, there is a designated function that actually performs this operation, but in a safe manner. It is called a transfer. Transfer function will only delegate enough gas to the other contract that it can actually receive the funds, and they cannot perform any other operation. So even if the receiver contract had this kind of logic, it wouldn't even trigger, because there wasn't enough gas, the transaction would revert, and the attack would never happen. The second option that it's a very good advice to follow in every smart contract, always use important operations before trying and calling external contracts. If you call external contracts, you're never certain that it's going to happen. What is the intended behavior? The third option, if you need to use the call value function, or you're worried about having a reentrancy issue at some point in the code, the reentrancy guard is a mutex-like modifier that can be used, and it's basically a flag. Setting a flag before and after calling a function, so you ensure that it's called only and only once. Yep. The reference is for the source code of reentrancy guard. And yes, let's go to the next step. Since there is a transfer function which is safe for reentrancy purposes, even though we started seeing a lot of reentrancy attacks at the beginning of 2017, by now they were obsolete. No one was using that. Everyone was using transfer. They were using safe operations that wouldn't allow for an attack to take place. But we also saw a different thing. In 2017, there were like 1,000 different ICOs, different tokens being developed every single day. The majority of them were ERC20 tokens, which means they were operating on top of the Ethereum platform. Now, the thing is that many different organizations tried to bridge different blockchains. For example, the way to actually send Ethereum from Ethereum to Bitcoin and Bitcoin to Ethereum, but in a native way, which is not possible yet. What is possible is to connect different ERC20 tokens, because it's in the same language, in the same prototype. It's much more easier to do that. Those kind of applications, we tend to call them bridges. They bridge two different tokens, and they allow the safe transaction in between them. Now, this is the new kind of reentrancy that we basically see. The last few months, there are applications which try to make a generic approach to different ERC20 tokens. For example, have a token which accepts and makes use of two different tokens. Again, a very naive example. We have a contract with a different project in the blockchain, and they want to operate like a gift card. So if you use their own contracts with their own tokens, you can transfer any other ERC20 token from within their platform. And as a reward, they're going to give you something back. So they're going to mint some tokens. Now, the issue here is that this function trusts that an ERC20 token is going to be an ERC20 token. In reality, this is just an address. This is just a type of variable, and they're trusting that this address is going to be a token. And they behave like that because they use the transfer function, which is, again, by the prototype, it's being used, and it's normal. The thing is, I can make contracts which can be interpreted as an ERC20 token. And I can have a transfer function inside, but it would do different things. And in this example, what I'm doing is, when they call the transfer function, I'm calling back the gift function. What I'm trying to exploit at this point is to trigger the mint function to get the reward multiple times without me spending a dime. Now you're going to think that this is not a reentrancy per se, you're trusting a very unknown object, and you're putting too much trust on that. And that is true. Reentrancy right here is the impact, and not the issue itself. It's more like a call to the unknown, which is the next topic. It is very common to have the need to use external contracts into your own code, into your own project. And in traditional programming, this is very normal. We do this every day. We have libraries, we have everything. But in smart contracts, it's different. You might have some functionality that requires that you send and make use of different contracts, as we saw before. In this case, we do either of two things. First, we trust that the function we're calling, we know what it's going to do. In the previous example, we believed that if that function was triggered successfully, it would have as an input an ERC20 token, which was wrong. The other option is that the function that we're calling is going to succeed. This is the example we see here in the code. Now, this is the method sender send is internal functionality. It's an external contract, but the concept is the same. There's a small difference. You can send funds with many different ways, but the two most basic ways is send and transfer. Transfer is the safe way, because if the function fails, it is going to revert the transaction, and send will fail silently, meaning it's going to return a false Boolean variable. It's not going to revert anything. So in this case, we're using a destroy function. Let's assume that this can only be used once. And this contains a very big amount of funds. It's 100 Ethereum, 1,000 Ethereum. And when we use this function, it does not have sufficient gas to make the transaction, the send transaction. It fails. Since we don't check what is the result of the function, it can lead to the next step, activating the Boolean destroyed, and we won't have access to this function again. This is lack of checking what is the result of the external functionality. Mitigation for these issues is mitigation. You should always be cautious when calling external contracts. You should always perform safe operations that could cause harm to your own contract at the beginning of the function. You shouldn't do them after calling an external contract. Yeah, very basic. Never assume functionality. If you're trusting something blindly, it's going to go wrong. Now, integer overflows. There are two basic cases where integer overflows actually happened and caused an issue. The first one is proof of weak hands token, coin. It was a Ponzi scheme in the blockchain, and there are too many of them in the blockchain. And that caused 866 Ethereum in losses. The next occurrence is the batch overflow. That was a piece of code that was added in at least 10 different tokens. They weren't very high-profile tokens, even though some of them were listed in exchanges. So this piece of code had a fault inside one of their functions, and during a multiplication, which wasn't performed safely, it could cause an overflow. And as a result, this is the amount of tokens that were extracted from the contracts. It has too many digits, and it wasn't good for them. There are around 20 different types of how an overflow can be conducted in smart contracts, in Solidity. And meaning that it can be performed with addition, division, subtraction, using the plus, and what I prefer the most is conversions. And this is something that I see very often in audits for smart contracts. It's converting unsigned integers to signed integers. Now, as you know, integers, unsigned and signed integers, they can overflow if you cast them to the other party. And one time I was very close into getting a very critical one, but at the last step, they had an upper limit, and someone found it before me. So mitigation, again. You should always perform operations within boundaries. You should always perform operations safely. There are safe libraries out there, like SafeMath by OpenZeppelin, I think it is. Yeah. And they're replace the common addition, subtraction, division in order to make them more safe. If you use those functions, you cannot extend the limit of the integers and cannot cause an overflow or underflow. If, again, you need to be certain that you won't go over certain limits, that's an advice that I provide, is to actually set the limit, the bounds that you don't want to exceed. And this is TX origin. This is the equivalent of the blockchain CSRF. TX origin is, this vulnerability is caused by the mistrust of the contract that TX origin is the same as the message sender. Now, when I send a transaction, it does have an origin. And this is the first person, the first entity that triggered that transaction. In contrast, message sender is the latest in line that called the final contract. So this is a very common function. This is a vulnerable function. Here, the trust that the TX origin is the same as message sender. So if a user calls this function, first they're going to check that the TX origin is the same as the owner of the contract. And if it passes this check, they will transfer the funds to their own wallet. This is how it actually translates for the end contracts. We do have the user and the vulnerable contract. So if I directly call the contract, for the contract, I'm going to be both TX origin and message sender. But if I add an intermediate, a delegator, who will delegate this functionality to the final contract, this will be different. Because for the end contract, the TX origin will be me. It will be the one who initiates the transaction, but the message sender is the intermediate. And in that case, we'll pass the first check, who is the origin of the transaction, which is the first entity, and the second one, who did the transfer, who to send the funds to, which is going to go to the malicious contract. Now, there is a possibility to bypass that and make from the code, to perform from the code. If you use the delegate call function, the malicious contract can, if they want to, delegate the user, the TX origin, and make it as a message sender. Does it make sense? Perfect. TX origin can be used. It's, in some cases, it is vital for the contracts and the business logic to use the TX origin, and we've seen it in use. And when you use that, you should always be cautious. You should always check all the possibilities that someone can misuse that. Again, if you're not certain that you need TX origin, just put it out. Just use message sender, and it's going to work. The next type of attack is the gas limit. The gas limit attack is what happens when you loop over arrays of unknown length. It is possible to exhaust the gas of a transaction and not being able to predict it if you don't know what kind of array you're looping through. So in the case, that's the most common example is for token sales where they actually try to distribute the funds, so they go over all of the whitelisted investors. This could be thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of users. In those cases, the length is very, very big, and if you have too many transactions inside, it's going to consume a lot of gas. This can lead in denial of services or in very expensive operations. Could be just to loop over all the array, it might cost from a few cents to a few $1,000s each time. So if you don't know the exact length of the array, you should either set an upper limit, or you can actually check from within the function, the iteration, if you have enough gas limit to complete all of the opcodes. In this case, when we perform the loop, we actually check what is the left gas, and if it's enough to perform the transactions inside this loop. If not, they just end the operation, and the transaction will not revert. I don't know if I went too fast, because I felt it went too fast. It went too fast, right? How much time do I have? 5 minutes. Okay, that's perfect. That's not too fast. I thought I had 20 minutes. All right. So we didn't get to cover today randomness. We didn't get to cover today visibility of functions, unexpected Ethereum. There are many parts of smart contract security that we couldn't fit in this presentation. Maybe if I get with this rate, I could do that. But yeah, that's all I have today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Magnus. I think I saw one question on slide.do before we move on to the questions from the audience. Let me just check if there was one. I think there was a question about the re-entrance, right? Let me just quickly refresh the question and answer screen. Yes, here's a question. Can we say re-entrance is a specialization of time of check, time of use attack, which is obviously a very common vulnerability in normal code, not just in smart contracts? Is it
That's
similar?
a good question. Yeah, I think so. I think I can say yes to that.
Yeah.
I need more time to think about this, but I think it's a yes.
It's just a standard kind of random thing. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like I understand Bitcoin, not Ethereum, but these attacks, I guess they're all specific to Ethereum and variations on Ethereum, are they not? Because
That's correct.
Something like Bitcoin, if you were in the pool, the time you've been in the pool is a factor, and that's part of the calculation of whether you get included in the next block, isn't it? Which I don't understand why Ethereum's removed that part of the calculation.
I'm not very familiar with Bitcoin mechanics under the hood.
Yeah, certainly the what you're calling gas, I guess in Bitcoin there would be the reward to the miner for the transaction fee, and obviously the ones with the big transaction fees get picked up quickly by miners who are looking for that. But if you have little or even no transaction fee, I think the time you've been sitting in the pool will then be included in the calculation, and eventually you get added to the next block. So I can't understand why Ethereum has like made these changes, like adding loops to the code, a possibility of a loop, and like removing time in the pool from the factor, etc. It seems like it's creating vulnerabilities in a later version than the reference client. So I don't understand what they're doing, but I guess I'm gonna have to read up on Ethereum.
The more functionality you have to a language, the more things you can do. And this is something that was lacking in Bitcoin. This is what they tried to do with Ethereum. And this is what they tried to do with the more advanced blockchains. In Ethereum, it's blockchain 1.0. And they don't have any logic. It's not Turing complete. They work with rewards, which is not the most efficient scheme. And this is why they actually have transaction costs as well. Because the block reward in Bitcoin, it is not enough. It's random. Whilst in Ethereum, they're mostly based in the rewards of the transactions. So basically, the users pay the miners, and not the ecosystem itself, which happens in Bitcoin.
The transaction fee and there's the reward.
Yeah. In Bitcoin, they add the transaction fee because they need it to operate the miners, because the reward is random. It is not certain that you're going to get some amount of money in some amount of time. It is, if you get the block, you're going to get the reward. Whilst in Ethereum, it doesn't work that way. It's a bit different. It's with transaction fees.
And I actually have a question with regards to integer overflow. Can we just go back to the integer one? Because obviously, this is a very standard attack, right? That standard vulnerability, which is very common. And yeah, just the standard bounce check missing. So we know what happens if you do it, for example, in a traditional programming language, right? But in Ethereum, you showed us a very interesting case here, right? When it's actually the value has gone over. But my question to you is, because if in blockchain world, everything is hashed and signed, right? So how come the overflow, the value is now completely different due to the integer overflow? But isn't the hash going to be different? Is it going to be caught at all?
Code from what?
It will not. Is it going to be valid? Basically, that's my question. Because I
Yeah.
don't think this transaction is going to be valid because the signature is not going to validate, right?
This is not Ethereum that's being transferred. It's the tokens of that blockchain. So, yeah, it's not going to validate if you check it, but if you don't check it, it's not going to validate. I don't know if it makes sense, but yeah. You're overflowing, right? You have this huge number, and you don't have any buffer overflows. It's not heap overflows. It's not exploitation like we regularly see. It's just changing the number and transferring an insane amount of funds. Again, this is not Ethereum,
right?
So it would be, it would be very weird if that was Ethereum.
I see. Okay.
That's another ERC20 token on top of Ethereum.
Right. Okay. Yeah, understand that. Thanks so much. Any more questions? Right. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Right. I think we've got just for the last talk of the day. It's just going to be a demo of the using Selenium with Zap, with OWASP Zap. Let me just quickly open the presentation.
Thank you.
Do you want the body mic so you can walk around?
No, it's
or?
fine. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I promise this won't take more than 10 minutes, so we're going to get to the pub soon. On my project at the minute, we use Zap as part of the verification that we're building secure code. My name is Mark Torrens. I've recently moved into cybersecurity. I'm a security architect for Kainos. And I'd also like to mention my colleague Mateusz Kalinowski, who did the Java research for this. So just to set the scene, we're using Zap, which is a web proxy. This is straight from the Zap website. It automatically finds security vulnerabilities. That's the key thing. And the other thing that we're going to talk about quickly is Selenium. So Selenium is a very well-known tool. It's used by a lot of development teams to automatically navigate their web applications. It's written in many languages. And on the project that I'm on, it's already a tool that we use. So the objective is to use Zap as part of the pipeline, so the web application gets built. And once it's deployed, we use Zap to detect vulnerabilities. The problem is that Zap is not magic, and so many things can stop in its tracks. And here's a few examples. So we have basic authentication in our project at the minute to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. We've got user logins and also form validation. And when you're doing the passive scans on Zap, all those things will stop it if you don't drive it properly with Selenium. So we already have Selenium scripts in our project. There are something called Zest scripts on Zap. I don't know much about them. They're a little bit strange, I think. But we already have Selenium, and that will do the job for us. So we set about investigating how we would do this. It took me a while to work out the difference between a passive scan and an active scan on this tool. But basically, a passive scan simply listens to the requests and responses that you're making. So you've got your web browser, you then have your web proxy in the middle, and then your web app. And all you're going to get from a passive scan is things like, hey, your response headers don't seem to be set, you don't have any cache control, and some of these query parameters look a bit dodgy. What you get from the active scan is once it's got the tree of requests, it knows how to actually make a set of attacks on your system. So this is the pipeline steps that we want. These steps mirror steps in a build tool like Jenkins. Unlike manual handling, we want to start Zap as a daemon. We run our Selenium scripts, which is effectively our passive scan. We have to wait for those to complete. Even once the Selenium scripts finish, there's a bit more activity happening in Zap. We want to wait for that to complete. We then start our active scan, wait for that to finish, and then get our reports. So you get supplied a shell script with Zap. This is assuming that Zap is installed on your build system. There also is a Docker image with Zap on it you can use. And so when you run this, the Zap daemon will start up. This is the Selenium part. The proxy element is the thing which tells Selenium that it's going to go and use the web proxy. And if you're using security headers in your web application, these are the important elements that you need to use in those settings. So what this is actually doing, Selenium is all about a web driver. The web driver, once you have one, is used to navigate to a page, to find objects, to click buttons. These are the capabilities that you inject into the web driver when you initialize it. And once this is done, you've got a Selenium web driver that is going to talk to your web proxy. So the passive scan runs. This is the thing that creates the scan tree in Zap. This gives Zap the ability to do the active scan later on. And you wait for the passive scan using the following endpoint. And if anybody is interested, all the bash scripts and the rest of the presentation are accurate and work. This brings back some JSON, and it uses the very handy JQ bash command line tool to read that JSON. And so our bash script is nice and simple. And this is just going to wait continually, sleeping for 10 seconds, and making sure that we get all our passive scanning is complete. No more scripts to run. We then start our active scan, hitting this endpoint. If successful, we get a scan ID back. And again, this is the bash script that will execute that for us. And again, we have to wait for active scan. And in the default setting, an active scan may take 5 to 10 minutes. So you do have to wait for that, otherwise your build will break. And again, this is a tool to get the active scan, to determine if the active scan is complete. And here we're waiting to make sure that it's 100% complete and all the active scanning is done. And that's really it. We then can get the scan results. We can get either JSON alerts, and we can also get an HTML report back. This is the bash script for alerts. And this one is for reports. And my bonus slide at the end is if you use strict transport security as a response header, you do not get an option to add a security exception on your browsers. And these are the steps that you have to take to make that work when you're using ZAP in a manual capacity. You have to pull back the SSL certificate from ZAP and add it to your browser. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mark. Obviously, OWASP ZAP is our flagship tool, and it's good to see that you built a set of scripts to run it. Any questions? As you understand, yeah, we have quite a few questions from staff from Grant.
Hi there. So are you actually plugging this into Jenkins as part of your build? So you're executing these scripts, pulling everything back in Jenkins for the artifacts at the end of the build? Yes, we are. Okay, cool.
How often do you run the builds? I mean, they must take a while, especially if you want to get a full scan. So does ZAP run on every build? Thank you.
I think what we are running in our active scans here are the default scans. I think there's probably more work to be done so that perhaps if you had a daily job rather than a job that's just at the end of a commit to a source repository, you would choose a much wider set of scans to run.
And what about false positives?
So we don't use this as a sort of fixed gate in our build cycle. We look at these reports. It's a team's job to look at the outputs and see if there's anything there that needs looked at.
If you have any feedback or feature requests to the developers, what would you tell them of ZAP?
When I started using the tool, I didn't really know that you could use it as a daemon like this. And the URLs that I've listed in the presentation that execute the scans, bring back the reports, and wait for those things to complete are only really available on Stack Overflow. I don't think they're available in documentation.
Yeah, I think that's a good feedback to take. And obviously, there's one new feature in ZAP coming up that we will announce next week, next Thursday, when we have our event at Facebook. And that will be the head of a display feature that's just been added to OWASP ZAP. And I think I'll try to get the creator and OWASP ZAP project leader, Simon Bennett, to present it to us at some point as well. You had the question as well, Grant?
I was just going to ask if I could also add a suggestion for ZAP, and that is the ability to add the exceptions.
Well, yeah, you can use it using policy. So there is, I think, there is now work going on in the, not on the main release trunk, but I think this is very frequently requested feature. Yeah. Okay, if no more questions, thanks very much, Mark. So just to finish off, just to remind everyone that next Thursday, right, we're gonna have another meetup at Facebook, which is much bigger, nicer venue. I think it's already full, okay? Yeah, sorry Microsoft, but it's like 250 people we can fit into Facebook, and I have a bigger screen, but yeah, doesn't. But of course, all the tickets are sold out. So if you want a ticket, please come and approach me, because we'll sort something out for the attendees of this event. And a reminder to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Slack, YouTube, Meetup, everywhere. We are now going to the pub, and that pub is called the Singer Tavern. Address is number 1 City Road. Very easy to get to. You can just turn right and turn left, and you will be there. And yeah, very big thanks to Microsoft, of course, for this venue, food and drink. So thank you very much. Thanks to our speaker, to Aunty, Evangelist, and Mark Torrance for their presentations. A reminder, all slides will be published on owasp.org. Video recordings will be available on YouTube. And of course, the stream will also be available on YouTube. Next meetup is next Thursday. We'll see you there, or we'll see you in the pub in about 10 minutes. See you there. Thank you.